Hey everybody!
Hi there, welcome back to Planet and God. We are continuing our journey through the
Book of Matthew,
and we are on chapter
24.
There we go, chapter 24, day 24. You ready?
Yes.
This is a big one.
This is all about prophecy.
It is, I love it. Alright, well, if you haven't read it, go read it. It's going to take you a minute because this is a big chapter. Well worth the read. And we will dive in. Again, we're not going verse by verse. We're not going to go super detailed. We're going to try and get the high level, big concepts through this one. And if there's interest later, leave a comment or let us know. And we'd be happy to dive, really dig into this this discourse. So without further ado, Matthew 24, here is our thoughts.
Alright,
So the end of 23, I just had a couple of opening remarks, if you don't mind, unless you do.
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, so chapter 23, when we finished that one, that closes out Jesus' public ministry. So his public ministry is now done, and he will not speak publicly anymore. So the offer for the Messianic kingdom for this generation of Jews, first century Israel, is gone, off the table entirely. It is promised to a future generation, right? And then chapters 24 and 25 contain what's known as the Olivet Discourse, right? And so in this, Jesus is fulfilling the role as prophet. He's going to give us prophecies both near and far within these two chapters. And like I said in the opening, this is a very hotly contested discourse. There's a lot of thoughts and opinions out there. We obviously have ours from our own studies, but we're going to, like I said, give high-level overview of it based on what we understand the scriptures to say and our studies. And yeah, that's kind of my opening remarks to it. So the public ministry is over. Jesus is speaking to the disciples, not publicly. And that's where we get into the Olivet Discourse.
So, opening up, I got verse 1 and 2.
Yep, same here.
And so that's about, he's talking about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD.
Yes, that is specifically what he's talking about, right? So you have Jesus and the disciples leaving the temple compound for the last time. Jesus will not return to the temple from here on out. This is known as Herod's temple because Herod's the one that built it. This is the second temple. And what's interesting is the stones that are used, because Jesus references the stones that are torn down. These are what's called Herodian blocks. They're like 10 to 12 feet long on average. These are huge stones. And what's interesting factoid about the temple, it took 84 years to build.
Ah, see, I didn't know that.
Yes, it was completed in 64 AD and then destroyed in 70 AD. It's pretty crazy that they just built it and then the Romans destroyed it. Actually, when the Romans came in to destroy Jerusalem, or not destroy Jerusalem, the general that was leading the charge into Jerusalem told his soldiers, do not destroy the temple. But someone went into the temple and started a fire, and that's
how it got destroyed.
And how it got destroyed. So the Romans actually were under order not to touch or destroy the temple. Its destruction was actually accidental. In their eyes, it was accidental. In God's eyes, it was on purpose because he prophesied that it would happen.
Yeah. Right, I thought that was interesting, right? It was prophecy then, but now it's our history.
Right.
So, anything else on 1 and 2?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, me either. Okay,
Cool.
So then, I broke it, I didn't actually break this down, I just specifically talked about verse 3.
Yes, verse 3 has a lot in it. What do you got?
So, I'm just going to read verse 3, I guess.
That's good.
Now, as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us when these things will be. Tell us when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age. And so they ask this question about the end.
Yeah.
And I think that this question is also coming from the previous woes, right? and verse 39 from Matthew 23.
Yeah.
Because they just heard all these woes and...
Yep. And then it culminates in 24 with the 24, 1 and 2 with the destruction of the temple. Like, when is all of this going to happen?
Right.
So what's interesting, though, within this verse, depending on your Bible, most Bibles will have like little title headings, and mine says the 2 questions of the disciples. But if you really look at it, they're asking 3 questions, right? You have, when will these things be, referring to the destruction of the temple, the woes on the Pharisees, right? What Emily was saying there. The second question, what will be the sign of your coming? So when are you going to come, the second coming? And then the third question, what will be the sign of the end of the age? Now the Jews recognize 2 ages, this age and the age to come. This age being what we're living in, the age to come referencing the Messianic kingdom.
Yeah.
So they're asking, when are you going to, what are the signs of your coming, and what are the signs of the end of this age? So essentially they're kind of like one question, they can be broken down into 2 and be 3 questions entirely.
Right. So then I'm sure you have, my next one is until like verse 14.
Verses, starting in verse 4 and going all the way through 25, you have what is known as the Olivet Discourse. This is the Olivet Discourse, right? So 24 and 25 contain it. You got 24, 1 through 3, which is kind of like an introductory.
And he's answering the questions.
He's going to answer the questions. So
questions.
Right. So in Matthew's account, he only answers 2 of the questions. I've done a study on the harmony of the Gospels, and in that you have to look at all of the Gospels together to get the overarching picture of what is actually being talked about here. Yes, you can look at just Matthew's. Well, that's what we're going to do today, but you miss bits and bobs if you only look at one of the Gospels. They're not, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Because there's things when I read, I like think about it and I'm like, oh, but I'm thinking about a different book.
Right. Right. So in Matthew's account, he answers the questions, what will be the signs of the end of the age? He answers that one first, and then he will answer, what will be the sign of your coming? Matthew, for some reason, does not answer what will be the sign for the fall of Jerusalem. What will be the sign of these things, the temple destruction? The answer to that is only found in the Gospel of Luke. So we're not sure why that is, but that's just an interesting factoid. Mm-hmm. So then, just breaking down the section now, verses 4 through 5 talks about. We start off talking about general characteristics of the church age. Right? Verses 4 and 5, there will be false messiahs, wars and rumors of wars. This is local wars, like between Israel and the neighboring nations, right? Local to that region.
Right.
Not world wars, not wars against America. This is regional to Israel. And then you see at the end of that section, but the end is not yet. That's how we know that this is referring to characteristics of the church age.
Right.
Because he's giving these signs, but the end is not yet. And then verses 6 through 8, we get into signs for the end of the age. So these are now we're into signs for the end of this age, the age that we're living in. We're still living in. You have nation against nation, referring to world wars. You have famines and earthquakes. And these are the beginning of the birth pains.
Yeah.
Now, just other interesting facts, like I said, because I've studied this multiple times. In 33 AD, there were 5 major earthquakes recorded in history. This has been gradually growing over the years. And then you have, in the last 2 centuries, the 19th century, there were 2,110 earthquakes. In the 20th century, the 20th century, that was, the 1900s, and Israel became a nation.
I was just about to ask that. Is that when Israel became a nation?
Yes, I think it was 1946. 1946. It was in the 1940s. But Israel became a nation in the 1940s, And since then, there have been over 900,000 recorded earthquakes. And this is the beginning of birth pains.
It's crazy.
It is crazy. I need to update my statistics because now we're in the 21st century, and I need to see where we're at. Maybe you'll see a fly up if I look it up. So that's that. Then we get into 9 through 28, and this passage can be seen in two ways. First, a lot of what Jesus says can be applied to the church age, right? What we're living at right now. However, there's a lot of correlation between 9 through 14 and the first half of the Great Tribulation. So you can almost see both the church age, but you could also take it and look at it in light of the Great Tribulation and look at Revelation and line the two up pretty well.
Right.
I lean towards that that Jesus is teaching on the tribulation.
I agree, and only because in verse 15, it says, "Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet," what does Daniel talk about in his book? He talks a lot about
the tribulation.
Yeah,
Daniel is that prophecy, time. Right? Because what's interesting factoid about Revelation, there's only 2%, I think, of Revelation that is new prophecy. Everything else can be gone back to the Old Testament, and you can see it.
Yeah, which I think is so fascinating.
It is fascinating. So you have verses 9 through 14 speak about general tribulation that will plague the followers of Jesus during the church age and during the Great Tribulation.
So, this was interesting. Okay, verse 14. I remember I said I had something at 14.
Yep.
Verse 14 says, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come." So, here's my question. It says the gospel of the kingdom. So, he's talking about the Messianic kingdom then, correct? The kingdom that would have come in.
Yes, I believe so.
Because, right, we look at the gospel of Jesus. It's different, I think, here.
Yes. So I have a reference, a verse reference that takes you all the way back to Matthew 4, which he talks about preaching the gospel of the kingdom, which back in Matthew chapter 4, it was the gospel of the Messianic kingdom.
I just find it really fascinating that the gospel of the kingdom is still being preached today.
Yes.
Because we're talking about the Messianic kingdom.
Right.
We're still talking, everything's about Jesus, but it's still underlying, the gospel of the kingdom is still within it.
Right.
I just think that's so cool.
It is.
So, anyway.
Because we want to see it.
That was my little tidbit.
That is a good tidbit. Yeah. But another thing that this could reference is the 144,000 during the tribulation, preaching the gospel, right? Because you have the 144,000.
Well, yeah, because then it says, "And then the end will come."
Right.
So
you have the 144,000 preaching the gospel. You have the eagle that flies,
right,
preaching the gospel, right? So the gospel gets out to everywhere, right? Yep. It's not something that we do today. So for those of you that think kingdom now...
I do, well, you know that.
Yes.
But I'm saying it still is preached today, but not in that manner.
Right. But it's nothing... The kingdom now, kingdom dominion people, they think that if they can usher in a culture of Christianity, then Jesus will come back. But they're thinking about it like, I'm going to work to bring out the kingdom. That's not what this is talking about. This is talking about, at the end... You look to Revelation, what happens to get the gospel to the ends of the earth? The 144,000, the angel and the eagle that fly about preaching the gospel.
Right.
Right? The two witnesses. All of these things happen to bring out the Messianic kingdom. It's not something we do now. The tribulation hasn't started, so you're not gonna rush God's timing.
Right. Because God's timing is perfect.
Yep. So that was 9 through 14. Verse 15 starts a correlation with the second half of the tribulation. So you can start seeing that. So like you'd said, the abomination of desolation occurs in here. So you have when Matthew writes in verse 15, the latter part of it, whoever reads, let him understand. Matthew is telling you to go to Daniel. Read Daniel, right? Because the revelation of John has not been written yet. So Matthew's point of reference is, I know the abomination of desolation is written in Daniel. So you, reader, go read Daniel and find out what he's talking about. And Daniel is a very fascinating book to study.
Yeah, it is.
I love that one. So, question, what is the abomination of desolation?
That's not the destruction of AD 7.
No, it's not.
Right. So it's probably... It can't be the signed treaty at the beginning of the tribulation either. So I would say it's
not.
when it's not the Antichrist anymore, it's the beast.
Yes.
So
well, in the Antichrist.
Halfway through the
Antichrist, yes. Halfway through the tribulation, the Antichrist will walk into the temple, do something. He will sit in the Holy of Holies. He will declare himself to be God, and he will set up an image of himself in the Holy of Holies to be worshipped. Yeah. That is the abomination of desolation. And so, once the Jews see this, once this happens, it triggers essentially the Antichrist, Satan, knows at that moment that his time is short. And so when you read through Revelation, he starts a dedicated war to try and eradicate all the Jews, because he's trying to get them to not say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So he tries really hard after that moment to really kill them, which is why 16 through 20 outlines the difficulties of travel and the fact that you must travel. You need to get out of Dodge once you see this. Go. So that's 16 through 20. I want to read verses 21 and 22 here. It says, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not seen since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Now, I wanted to make reference to the days that are shortened, right? It's not that the time will be shorter than it needs to be. It just means that the tribulation will not last a day, a second, an hour, longer than the 7 years it needs to.
Right.
That's kind of what that phrase means there. And you have 23 through 26. You get a warning to not look for false messiahs, because you'll still have that going on during the Great Tribulation, still trying to lead people astray. And then 27 and 28 gives us the fact that the second coming of the Son of Man will be unmistakable. For as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of the Man. Right? It is going to be, you're going to know. Right? So you've got, and Paul even makes reference to this, I think it's in Thessalonians, where people were saying, oh, we're in the tribulation, God's going to come, right? They were confused about that. And it's no, that's not the case. You're going to know.
Right. So then verses 29, I have...
So yeah, 29 through 31 starts the answer to the second question. What will be the sign of your second coming?
Verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. So this brought me to Romans 8, 21 and 22. And it says there, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. So it brought me to that because, like, even the earth knows that there is judgment. I don't know, I know it's not in direct correlation to it.
It kind of fits with what we talked about earlier, the birth pains, the earthquakes, the plagues.
But it's just, the earth even knows the earth is also cursed with sin, and it understands that there's judgment because of that.
Yep.
So I don't know. So that verse just brought me back to Romans, so
Yeah.
thought I'd share that. But,
Yeah, the note that I had essentially was that with 29 and 30, the cosmic events will precede the second coming of the Messiah. Again, denoting the fact that it's going to be well known that the Messiah is coming.
So, verse 30, it says, "Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven." So, what is the sign of the Son of Man?
I don't know.
I know, I thought that was interesting. So, that was my question on that, but I know a lot of times my questions can't be answered. But doesn't that intrigue you?
Okay, well, it does. So, again, using my cross references here, that goes to Daniel 7:13, which says, "I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before me. Then to him was given dominion and glory, and a kingdom, and all the peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed." So it sounds like that the sign of his coming is the fact that the Son of Man is coming in the clouds.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I just thought that was interesting.
And he's coming in the clouds to receive his kingdom.
Yeah, the second coming.
The second coming.
So, verse 31 then, which is, yeah, I know, we've
The
almost
sound
done
of trumpets.
We've almost done this whole thing verse by verse. But,
I know.
So, verse 31 says, "And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other." So, this is talking about then the second coming, or is this talking about...
That's still the second coming.
Because I think it's interesting. It says he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, right? So,
Yeah.
when he comes in the rapture, there will be a trumpet sounding.
Right.
So this is a different trumpet.
This is a different trumpet, yes.
Okay.
Because the whole context here is talking about the second coming.
Right, I agree. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It just, you can see how that would be, not sure.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
And then verse 32, well, we haven't gotten there yet, have we?
Well, we are. We're there. 32 through 35, we get the parable of the fig tree.
Yes, which that was in one of the other chapters, right? And then this is, he's referring to that
the other
fig tree.
chapter, he curses the fig tree.
Right.
That was the cursing of the fig tree at the very beginning of Holy Week. He cursed the fig tree. Now we are at analyzing a fig tree. It's not the same fig tree, but what he's doing here is he's making reference to the fact that you can analyze a fig tree and know when summer is near.
Right, it's an illustration.
It's an illustration, right, from what he just taught on. So as you can analyze times in the season by looking at the fig tree, you can analyze times and seasons, world events happening around you, local events happening in Israel, and know when the Son of Man is coming.
Yeah.
Or have a general idea.
I think that's why we believe we're getting real close.
Yeah, it is. You look at the events and you look at the Bible, we are getting very close. And so what this enables us, and what we'll see later through the discourse, is it enables us to stand ready and always be watchful, because that is a key theme coming up in more parables of Jesus.
I love that Jesus doesn't leave us in the dark, right? He's explaining all these things. He's giving us insights.
Right.
It's so important to have, the Bible in our back pocket.
It is. And that's why we are called to be watchmen. We are to be watchful and ready.
So I think that's actually all the notes I have for
Wow.
the chapter. So even though there's still a little bit left.
There is a little bit. So 36 through 4, I'll keep going then.
You keep going.
36 through 44, Jesus now gives general signs that help us to understand we're getting close to the end of the age. However, the exact day or hour is unknown. The foolish ones are the ones who worry about dates, set dates, look for dates, don't. Those are the fools.
Well, I think that's also like false prophets do that too.
Yeah, false prophets will do that.
So you know that if somebody says that, it's false.
Right.
Like that's a clear sign.
even Jesus himself, the Messiah himself, the Son of God himself, is not worried about the date. Right? He is unconcerned with our calling to God. The point of this is that we are to remain faithful. I want to read verse 42 here. It says, "Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming." That's the point. Watch.
Like we have a task.
Yeah.
This is what we're supposed to do.
Right.
We're supposed to be watchful and be ready, right? We're not supposed to just like sit back and chill.
Yep. It continues on with the next parable, the parable of the master of the house in 43 and 44. The emphasis is on being ready as well as being watchful. And then we wrap it up with verses 45 through 51. Shoo! Longer video today. Sorry about that. Not really. Jesus uses another parable to reiterate the need for being faithful. I want to read verse 46 here. It says, "Blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find so doing." Right? Compare that to verse 48, which reads, "But if the evil servant says in his heart, my master is delayed at his coming." Right? So you see kind of the comparison here. God doesn't give us warnings so that we sit on our hands and say, "Oh, he's delaying." No, he gives us warnings so that we can be about his work. We can be in service to him. He calls us to choose him now and to serve him faithfully now, not later. That wraps it up for the chapter. More important than the questions and answers about what Jesus is talking about for the future events is Jesus' own words of advice. He gives us two very important words of advice throughout this chapter. I'm going to read them. Matthew 24:42. "Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your Lord is coming." The second one, like it, verse 44. "Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." More important than understanding the mysteries of the Olivet Discourse is being watchful, ready, and working for the Lord. That is more important. We are to remain faithful to his service until he comes.
Yeah, and I think that the Lord knows our hearts and he prepares us for different things for different reasons.
Yeah.
So like if he's having you study a specific thing, there's a reason behind it.
Yep.
So
100%.
Yep.
So that wraps up 24. You have your charge now. Watch, be ready, be faithful. Examine yourself and make sure that you are doing those things, that you are faithful to the Lord and not sitting on your hands doing nothing.
And we're going to be doing the same thing over here.
Exactly. So.
All right. So we'll see you in the next chapter.
All right, 25.
Bye.
Bye.